Hello, my name is Kelly Prox. I was a social media team leader of this capstone project. For this capstone project, our classmates were asked to propose an iGym team to YSU. For the social media team, we were in charge of contacting stakeholders for this project in person and through email to explain to them about the iGym Foundation and if it would be feasible to propose one at YSU. The iGym Foundation is an international genetically engineered machine competition based at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It is a nonprofit organization aimed at undergraduate university students, high school, and graduate students looking to improve the field of synthetic biology. Students work in teams at their university to build genetically engineered systems using standard biological parts called biobricks. Students work in teams throughout the year at their university or high school, researching and conducting lab experiments to build genetically engineered systems to compete in the annual iGym competition at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. As for my contributions to the social media team, I was involved in overseeing my team's communications to stakeholders. I also directed tasks to my team members about which stakeholders they would be in charge of contacting. In the beginning of this project, I helped determine which stakeholders would be most helpful for this project. Our team agreed upon contacting faculty in chemistry, biology, and engineering departments. The stakeholders that I personally contacted through email included Dr. Jalali, Dr. Min, Dr. Johnston, Dr. Lovelace, and Dr. Simonson. Although I contacted stakeholders through email, I also met with them in person and conducted an interview. The project manager, Matthew Mills, and I conducted interviews with stakeholders including Dr. Jalali, Dr. Simonson, Dr. Price, Dr. Walker, and Dr. Wagner. Matthew and I conducted interviews with these stakeholders, informing them about the iGym Foundation and possibly proposing an iGym team here at YSU. During the interview, we mentioned to them about how an iGym team would be proposed and what it would need to be created. So some of the resources that it would need included a lab space for students to conduct experiments. It would need involvement of faculty members and funding. So after talking with the stakeholders and informing them about the iGym Foundation, Matthew and I also asked them if they would think this would be a feasible project to obtain funding and any resources needed to create a team. After the scheduled interviews, I also followed up the interviews, emailing stakeholders additional information about how to create an iGym team and any iGym competitions, competition projects that they could see. So for this part of the project, I also helped create the baseline project plan, including management issues of how team leaders and project managers would oversee their teams and ensure that this project does not fail. I also determine how teams will communicate with each other and with stakeholders. In the baseline project plan, I determined the system description, which described our Facebook page created for stakeholders and any alternatives to communication tools for an iGym team. For the second half of this project, we were asked to propose a system development lifecycle model, which is a step-by-step process that would help businesses and organizations produce a quality, successful software. So the new SDLC model that I am proposing is called the Expedient model. It will follow the process for how to develop, alter, maintain, and replace a software system. This new system development lifecycle model will include the advantages of the Agile model while getting rid of its disadvantages. The steps of this new system development lifecycle model will include an approach and steps for requirements and specifications, development, testing, documentation, deployment, and maintenance. So some of the Agile cons in its requirements, there's not very much planning in the Agile requirements phase. There's barely enough modeling at the beginning of the project to understand the requirements that you would need for a system. So since there's not very much planning in the Agile requirements phase, this could be a problem for team members and also clients to determine what their requirements exactly are if they're not already defined. And if the requirements aren't already defined, this can often lead to changes throughout the software that may be needed. So the solution to this, I'm proposing that during this stage, developers and clients and team members communicate to determine the goals and expectations for the project, as well as current and potential issues that would need to be addressed. So the Expedient model will concentrate more on planning. Software users, developers, and team managers would agree on the project scope and any potential issues that may occur. So this model concentrates more on planning and makes sure that requirements are clearly defined from the beginning. Some of the cons of the development of Agile, it lacks an overall design. For example, it lacks a user experience design, which is the process of enhancing user satisfaction with a product by improving the usability, accessibility, and pleasure provided in the interaction with a product. So, my proposal for a solution for this is to build out the user design through various prototype iterations. In the RAD model, includes prototype iterations. That's where I got this idea. Developers would create a prototype that satisfies all or some of the requirements that would be needed by customers. This prototype may cut corners to reach a working state, and that's acceptable because the prototype is only presented to the client for feedback. So having this, having a prototype iteration would help the user interact with the prototype, and so the developer could gain client feedback about what requirements they need, and if the client needs to change any requirements that they may have not anticipated. So some testing cons of Agile. The testing in the Agile method is required after each phase. The developer must ensure the product is functioning before they can move to the next phase. The downside to this of testing in the Agile model is that it may require more time to be given to test a product after each phase. This can often halt a project if too much time is spent on debugging errors after each phase. For my solution, the expedient model will incorporate longer phases for testing software. Phases will be lengthened to 4 to 6 weeks instead of 2 to 4 weeks. Due to the concerns of the rush time in Agile, the longer length will provide team members with more time to solve errors. And also, along with the 4 to 6 weeks that will be included for each testing phase in the expedient model, I'm also proposing testing plans, unit testing, integration testing, system testing, and user acceptance testing. Unit testing will allow any bugs to be eliminated at the code level. Integration testing will integrate models and test the system. System testing will test the complete application with its functionality, interdependency, and communication. And finally, user acceptance testing will be performed in a user environment that resembles the production environment. I'm proposing that these 4 tests be included in my testing phase to make sure that there are no errors that are left uncovered. Documentation in the Agile method. Agile claims that the most effective and efficient method of conveying information is face-to-face conversation. However, when new members join an Agile team, they do not know the details about certain features or how they need to perform them. Agile has little documentation. The lack of documentation could be a problem, especially in debugging software. If team members working on a software can't remember what was done previously or what needs fixed, this can be an example of why documentation may be needed. Agile states that the most efficient way to communicate is face-to-face conversation. This is a nice concept, but it is not always a feasible option. I believe that team members should also stay current in today's society by using communication tools that would allow the employees the flexibility to work anywhere, to work from anywhere and communicate without having face-to-face communication. Oftentimes when Agile team members have meetings, they can often misunderstand things. So 2 parties often can remember things differently or have different understandings. And documentation could help ensure that everyone is on the same page. And like I said, documentation could help new members joining a team about what certain features they do not know about and what they need to do to perform. So as for my solution to documentation, lack of documentation in the Agile model, I'm proposing to incorporate documentation when changes occur using face-to-face communication and a communication software to also interact. This will improve on the lack of Agile documentation and also requiring testing in every phase is what I'm proposing in the expedient model. As for deployment in Agile, deployments often take a long time and routinely run into issues. Long release times can be caused by the team having to perform a large number of manual steps or spending time troubleshooting issues throughout the deployment. Agile users often focus mostly on speeding up the time of deployment and deploying more frequently, trying to deploy one new version after another, and often rushing, increasing the risk of error. So the solution that I'm proposing for the expedient model is not to rush. Take the time needed to make each sprint releasable. This doesn't mean you have to actually release it, but you should come close to releasing it. Also in the expedient model, spend this phase connecting the back end to production data, writing thorough documentation, and doing any other maintenance tasks required before handing the product over with confidence. Some of the cons of maintenance and Agile. Agile team members are stretched out working on new releases, completing maintenance activities for older releases and existing customers. Developers may often work on multiple projects at one time, which would prevent them from consuming all their time into one project. Through researching, I also found that an estimated 75% to 85% of the amount of software development is system maintenance. The solution I'm proposing for the expedient model is to have a bigger team of people to focus primarily on maintenance tasks and have another set of people focus on new development tasks. In conclusion, the new SDLC model, the expedient model, the requirements will have more planning. Developers and team managers agree on the project scope, prominent issues, potential issues, and obtain management authorization. Development will build out user design through various prototype iterations to interact, so the customer could interact with the prototype and if there's any changes in requirements that need to be made. Testing will incorporate longer phases for testing software. Phases will be lengthened to 4 to 6 weeks instead of 2 to 4 weeks like in the Agile phase. Documentation in the expedient model will include documentation in every phase, use face-to-face communication as well as the communication software to interact. Deployment in the expedient model will take time needed to make each sprint releasable. This phase will be spent doing maintenance tasks required before handing the product over with confidence. Lastly, maintenance will have specific people focus on primarily on maintenance tasks while others will be fully occupied with new development tasks. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you.